Well, I have a multi-cart in my Dynamo HS5, so it has like hundreds of games and stuff. We wanted to see, because we saw online how you could hook Model 1 Genesis, which has RGB, directly to an arcade cabinet. And it looked pretty good. It was dim. We adjusted our brightness to compensate, and it ended up looking really, really good and playing good. Now, we wanted it to run smoother and faster, so we installed a halt switch and then a 14 megahertz mod. And so we could just reach in through the coin door and flip those switches and adjust them to have a game that's running. So certain games it benefits from greatly. Viewpoint, Sonic 2, Hang On. Games will noticeably detect that it's a kind of a choppier frame rate, even though I would think it wasn't, anything that really affected gameplay greatly. It wasn't like the Super Nintendo where games just, slow down way too much and are annoyingly choppy and slow, almost unplayable, like Super R-Type or Gradius 3 or Super Ghouls and Ghosts, or pretty much anything that was dumped by Konami onto an arcade kind of setup for the Super Nintendo. They all ran too slow. They all got too choppy. Sega, it had intermittent choppiness. Now, something people might not know about the Sega Genesis is it actually has a pin on the cartridge port that allows it to be 14 megahertz. That's just with the standard setup for the Model 1. I don't know if cartridges use that or if it was part of any of the programming. I don't think so, though. I think it was there. And, part of the reason why it wasn't used is because the 68,000 has to be halted to then switch it into 14 megahertz mode. It doesn't really increase stress on the system at all. It's nothing that's going to harm the system, but the Z80 sometimes has a problem keeping up with the 68,000. So you might notice that music will not be perfect, or sound effects might be affected. Things that the Z80 is doing alongside the 68,000 might be negatively impacted. And a lot of times it has to do with how you play the game. For instance, if you start playing Hang On and then there's no music playing, and then you halt the system and go to 14 megahertz mode, then you'll notice there's no music playing when you play the game itself. But if you wait until you're in the part of the game where you choose the level and it's actually playing the music, then you halt it and put it in 14 megahertz mod, then music will play throughout the game. So it can be hit or miss. Some games the music will drop out. It's not something that's effective for every game, but it does help with frame drops. What most people do is they'll set up their system to run 10 megahertz or something else, 12, and that involves installing a second oscillator, which I don't want to have to do. So we wanted to just go ahead and do the double speed 14 megahertz mod. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this apart because I've had some problems with the 14 megahertz mod since the last time I worked on this system. It will halt and sometimes hang, and it won't switch into the 14 megahertz mode. I also want to check the connections from the last time I did work on this. Now, back when we did this, my friend did the work. I got the information, and she did the work, and used non-stranded wire. And that's good for a nice stable connection, but it's not good for working on the system. When you work on the system, the wiring likes to move around. I just saw right where the error was, as easy as it is to fix. The error is right here. This just popped up, and the place on the processor where it was, and it's because it's a non-stranded wire, and it just kind of came right off. So I'm going to replace that with stranded wire right now. So I'm going to go ahead and heat up my soldering iron here, and I just have a nice cheap Chinese one, but it's really good. It has adjustable temperature, and I can't complain. It's honestly, a cheap Chinese soldering iron is better than pretty much any entry-level soldering iron that you can get, because it will have adjustable speed and it'll have all kinds of extras that usually you pay more for. So changes I've done here, this is all this work, and I'll go ahead and point out some of these changes while we've got the system opened. Let's see if I can't, oh, that's too dark. Well, it's going to be bright no matter what. But what I'd like to do is, let me see if that helps. Not really. Okay, I want to point out how I set up the system to run with USB 5 volts. That's what this system runs on. This system, because it was feeding power directly off the 5 volt rail from the switching power supply within the arcade machine, you can see here the power connecting port is gone, and the 2 regulation parts are gone, and they've just been made to pass through. So this is a pass-through wire, this is a pass-through wire. It could be whatever, just as long as electricity is passing through them. Okay, so let's just talk over what's going on here briefly. Okay, now normal baud wires are going to be in your Sega. So this yellow, green, and blue wires, those are just baud wires that come with your Model 1 Sega. And I've recapped some of this. I actually test caps, and if a cap is bad, then I'll replace it. I know everyone says you should just recap the entire system, but in this particular case, this is a little side project that I'm having fun with. I don't feel like I need to use all of my capacitors on this system. Okay, so we've got the Sony CA1145P here, and right here is a grounding point. Okay, this is on pin 1, so that's going to be grounded. Over here we have power. We have, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure red is your 5 volt lead, and white is your ground. So those are also grounded. And then, to make sure this system works flawlessly, because the variance in power coming from 5 volt can be 4.8 or so, upwards of 5.2 or slightly higher, I would consider it a clean, reliable 5 volt, but some people might not. Maybe they think it's too sensitive, okay? So to remedy that, I went ahead and put 5 volts of power directly into the Zilog 80, which is under this. Kind of hard to see, but that's this chip right here, your Z80. That handles sound on your Sega Genesis games, but also occasionally it handles sound and other functions on your Sega Genesis. And then, of course, it allows that backwards compatibility with your Sega Master System. So your Z80 is the primary processor in a Sega Master System. Now, US Sega Master Systems, European and Brazilian Sega Master Systems, basically any Master System outside of Japan, will have a noise processor, the PSG signal generator, sound generator chip. And as cute as that is, it's not as advanced as the FM upgraded Japanese systems. So the Mark III could be upgraded with a FM chip and made everything sound better. I think sometimes sound effects suffer a tiny bit, but I always prefer FM music over about 95% of the time or more, I prefer the FM music over the PSG. So the Sega has the capability of reproducing that PSG sound, and it has the Z80. So, you know, out of the box, the Model 1 Genesis, and I'm pretty sure 2 and 3 also have everything necessary to play Master System games, but without FM sound. So the Japanese Master System, though, has 2 or 3 chips all working together to give you that. It has an amplifying chip, which must work perfectly, and it has the FM sound chip. It's a little more complicated to deal with. Okay, so we've got this guy hot, and I'm just going to go ahead and remove. Okay, so I went ahead and repositioned that. I hope it works. But yet, just the heat from the solder went ahead and pulled the connector part from that switch. So just tinning the processor where the glue was. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and put a non-stranded wire there. Okay. Alright, now I think that's in there pretty good. And I'm just going to go ahead and reconnect the halt switch wire. Alright. Oh, see, it wanted to come out. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and put a bend in it. Now these boards are pretty resilient, and I've noticed that they'll stand up to quite a lot of adjustment. That just came out again. All right, and they're tough. They're tough little systems. Now, I'm really hoping I can get that kind of pushed back down in there, so I'll be trying that. Briefly. Okay, I went ahead and pushed it back down in there, and just to help out a slight bit, I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue around it, just to reduce the chance of it shifting around or being pulled out again. And that switch might actually need to be replaced. It's a momentary switch. You just press it and then the system halts, whereas this is a 3-point switch for the 14 megahertz mod, which goes under the board. So for the 5 volt, you're going to remove the power. You can either remove the power here or just kind of set it aside. And this mod, if you're doing this to a Genesis that hasn't been cannibalized for use in an arcade cabinet, then you're going to have all the nice clean edges and stuff. And what you can do then is put a plug here with an opening, or just have the 5 volt wire USB going through the normal plug-in hole, and then it'll be a standard Sega Genesis with all the original parts there still, except for these two regulators. And I guess you could even just tape the regulators in here, because there's this little lane here, and that'd be fine. And so then you're going to want to tap into these two, red for 5 volt, white for ground, and then ground your Sony CXA11 45P here, and then you want to add the 5 volts to, and it's pin 11 of your Zilog, your Z80, And the reason I added this was because sound wouldn't work sometimes, but I'm assuming it could be because of the mods. So if you're getting, good sound in lots of games, then that's probably an unnecessary thing here. And what this does is it bypasses the power switch. So the on-off of the system is then plugging and unplugging the USB plug. And reset still works. So if you're just using a normal cartridge, not a multi-cart, then you can do this, and all you have to do is hit reset, and you're fine. If you're using a multi-cart, though, I've noticed you can actually hold reset, take out the cart, put it back in, let go of reset, and then it will take you back to the menu of most SD card or multi-carts. So not having power working straight on the system is really of almost no consequence. Plus, you have to reach down to deal with your system, and if your USB plug-in is close to where the system is, which it should be, then just unplugging the USB plug-in is no big deal. Now, if I did this mod on a different system, which I might, because, why would you do this? Well, one of the highest fail rate components of any game system is the AC adapter. Many game systems are filtering the power from either 12 or 9 volts into 5 volts. Okay, so a raw 5 volts of power is actually it's exactly the same. The system doesn't know any different because the regulator is where the power is being reduced from whatever 12 or 9 down to 5. So off the top of my head, the Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, and several other game systems from the time, the Master System, they all are going to have voltage regulators that drop the power down to 5 volts. With the one tab voltage regulators that you usually see in these systems, it could be just as easy as soldering to the 5 volt. That's it. Then you're giving 5 volts right to where it would be coming out of the voltage regulator. You're in essence bypassing the voltage regulator. So you don't, in that case, you don't have to remove anything. Of course, if you want to remove the power connector so that your cord can go out the back, that's fine too. That's easy. But this is pretty easy. Now, there are a few more wires and little things involved with the halt switch and with the 14 megahertz mod. Now, first thing you want to do if you're going to be working on your Sega, in my opinion, the best first thing you can do is get longer wires. Go ahead and either remove your connector because it's an annoyance, or splice longer wires onto your LED, because the LED wires are notoriously short, and they make it so that working on these systems is very difficult. So adding this longer cord here makes it so you can take your lid off your Sega. It doesn't affect your LED. Your LED still works fine if everything's done right. And I've just went ahead and soldered down here to add longer wires to my LED. Then I can take the lid off easily and I don't have to worry about it. So this is done. It looks like I've got a pretty clean connection here. And I'm going to go test it out. Okay, here we have Afterburner for the Master System. This is testing out the Z80 functionality. If your Z80 is not working, then this won't work. If it's not getting enough power, then things will be wrong with it. Sometimes it will lose color or sound. But this is working perfectly fine. I'll go ahead and play it real quick. Here's my Sega pad. Another thing I've been doing is restoring these pads and also enhancing them. I've noticed that the stiff padded ones, you actually can loosen them up quite a bit. The method I'm using is by putting either a washer or something in between the pad and the PCB. And what that'll do is we'll make it so there's ever slightly more room between the thumb pad itself and the button that it presses down. That's the big problem with the stiff pads, is they're just flat against the button pad, and that that can make it very difficult. I don't even know what just hit me. It can make it very difficult. The thumb pads are super tight, so adding just a slight amount of I mean, it's like, it can be a millimeter or less. It's a very small amount of space in between those will make the thumb pad float just enough, and it really fixes everything. It makes the thumb pad really nice. So it's not nearly as stiff as what these can be. Now, of course, there are, I've been studying this lately, there are 3 different types of the 3-button pads. There are the 3-button pads with extremely stiff thumb pads that are almost comically stiff and unusable. There are 3-button pads with just a little bit of room, and those often will have a metal ball in the center of the pad, of the button pad part inside. It's like a silicone kind of plasticky, rubbery layer with magnetic points that's what you're pushing on when you push down on the pad. And then the third design was a floating thumb pad, much like the 6-button pad. Of course, the third design is the superior, excellent controller. Now, why not just use a 6-button pad? There are certain games that don't work well or at all with a 6-button pad. I think Forgotten Worlds comes to mind. It will not play properly with a 6-button pad, even if you start it. I don't think it will play properly even if you start it with the mode button pressed down. When you start a game that is 3-button, you hold the mode button down on your 6-button pad, and it will be in 3-button mode for that game. But that is not necessary for the majority of games for the Sega Genesis. So certain games, though, will not function unless your 6-button pad is in 3-button mode. And so this is a reason to use a 3-button pad. If you have the third version, then you have the floating thumb pad. It's perfect. It's one of the best. It is the best 3-button Sega pad you can get, and it also is great for Master System games too, like this one. Because the Master System thumb pads are notoriously stiff and hard to press. They just don't, they're not great, any of them. I've had every kind. I've had the Japanese ones. Those have little raised, thin pieces, almost like little edges coming out of the center. The US ones were softer and didn't have the protrusions, so they were slightly better, but they were still relatively stiff. And then the button feel themselves are kind of like, I don't know, they're plungy, kind of sucky feeling. Like they feel like they're being jammed down, and then they take a second to kind of spring back up. They're slow, harder to use buttons. They're nothing like, you know, the level of precision you get with a Nintendo gamepad or with a floating pad, 3-button Sega Genesis pad, or of course a 6-button Sega Genesis pad, which are all extremely good. So yeah, working on these controllers to make the thumb pad float is beneficial, because you are basically, you know, resurrecting a nearly unusable, or at the very least extremely uncomfortable gamepad to the point where it can be usable. And now all of the gamepads I've been working on are all usable all the time. What I usually use, of course, are the third version floating thumb pad 3-button pads, and those work for the majority of Sega Genesis games, because most Sega Genesis games do not use the 6-button pad extra buttons, but most Sega Genesis games will work with the 6-button pad without holding the mode button, without changing it. But there are some older Sega Genesis games where if you don't use a 3-button pad, the game just won't work right. And there are some of the good ones, like Forgotten Worlds is one of them. Okay, so now let's try out a Sega Genesis game. I'm holding reset, and that will take me back to the menu, here we go. This is my EverDrive, and this is a licensed EverDrive. They do make Chinese knockoff EverDrives. And why would you want a Chinese knockoff EverDrive? Well, there are special functions to modern EverDrives. They can have ROM sizes that exceed anything that was available at the time. The newest ones, that are the most expensive ones, can actually emulate the Sega CD. So you don't need a Sega CD, but you can play Sega CD ROMs through your hardware, Sega Genesis. But the cheapest functionality of an EverDrive is easily copied. And so there are cheap Chinese clones of EverDrives of varying systems. They're not going to have the support of a licensed Mega Drive or EverDrive. I mean, they're not going to have the the updated firmwares or the extra functionality. For instance, there's a master EverDrive that will, and it's expensive. It's I think between $150 $200 or more. But it adds FM chip functionality to your Master System games. And it actually has a real Yamaha FM sound chip or equivalent sound chip on the board of the cartridge. Well, the Chinese knockoff ones are not going to have that. They're not going to emulate it or anything like that. But the Chinese ones will be, $30 to $50. And what they will do is let you put an SD card full of Master System ROMs and on it, and then play it on real hardware. Now, that's good for me because I have a Japanese Master System. So, and I have a cable, a specially made cable coming out of the expansion port of the back that I can hook US games up to. So it's a Japanese Master System that will play US games, and then it will have that lost FM sound that was programmed into those games natively. And so having a EverDrive that can do that makes it so it cuts way down on the wear and tear on the cable. It's one of those things where I can plug it in and then never need to unplug the cartridge from my Japanese Master System ever again. I can start it up, choose a game from the menu, and it can be any game. And if there's FM compatibility, then I'm going to have it natively with hardware. I don't need an additional FM chip for that. Now, if I wanted that FM sound and I was ready to pay that couple of $100 for it, then I could use that on, possibly on a power-based converter, maybe. Maybe not though. But I don't have a US Master System because I like the SG-1000 games, I like the Mark III and Japanese Sega Master System games, the MyCard games, and the US games, and my system can support all of those. And it's not a permanent mod, it's just a cable that you can make, or you can buy a board or cable that will do the same thing. Plugs into your expansion port and then lets you plug a American or whatever country that uses the wider boards, which are all of them except for Japan, Master System game into your Japanese Master System. And if it's 60 hertz, then it's going to work. And you'll get that native FM sound that's missing. And it's usually much, much better. Okay, let's run a game here. I'll run, let's see here, something that, here we go, Super Hang-On Enhanced. We'll go ahead and play this one for a reason. Now this is a slightly modified version of Super Hang-On where someone has changed the colors to better match the arcade and change certain background elements to better match the arcade. Okay. And we're going to watch the demo briefly, and we can watch this. And I want you to pay close attention. See the kind of the jitteriness of the oncoming background objects. Those little whatever dry desert tree husks or whatever they are, kind of slowly coming towards you. This is running at the stock speed. In a second I'm going to hit the halt switch, and then I'm going to shift the system into 14 megahertz mode, and we'll see immediately the difference between a 7.68 or whatever 69 megahertz Sega Genesis and a 14 megahertz Sega Genesis. My 12-year-old daughter just made vegan sloppy joes for everybody that were super, super good. Oh, it looks like I've cut off the bottom of the screen ever so slightly, so let's back up just a bit so we can kind of see as much of the screen here. There we go. That's a little better. You see the choppiness of those objects coming towards you. Okay, now I'm going to halt the system, and I'm going to restart it in 14 megahertz mode. Here we go. This is Hang On, Super Hang On in 14 megahertz mode. Now, if you'll notice immediately, the jitteriness, the choppiness of the oncoming background items is gone. They run really, really smoothly. That's the effect of using a 14 megahertz mod. That's not part of this modded game. This game runs the same, as far as I know, as Super Hang On. And I have Super Hang On. I have the Japanese version, the US version, and the this is a ROM, which is an edited one. I was wondering, as I was playing it the other day, because I thought I remembered it having Marlboro ads while you were playing. And I didn't see them. I was like, doesn't this have Marlboro ads? And I thought maybe it was part of the modded, the hacked version of the game to bring back some of the authenticity from the original. Then I was testing this system that I've been working on with the Sega 6-pack, which has Super Hang On as one of the games. And I was playing it, and immediately I realized, as I was getting through like the second rung in the first race, that there were Marlboro signs. So the Sega 6-pack version of this game has the original Marlboro signs while you're racing. And I thought that was really great. Alright, now, there's no music right now. Either that or it's too quiet to hear. Let's see. Yeah, no, there's no music. Now, that's because there was no music playing when I turned on the mod. So the Z80 is kind of like, what do I do? Right? So I'm going to go ahead and restart it. And I'm going to go, here we go. Get the music going. Now, okay. Now the music is working. Now we're in 14 megahertz mode with the music and sound effects and everything. I think the bottom of the screen's cut off slightly. Now, of course, if you ever played this back in the day like I did, the arcade version of Hang On had either, at the very minimum, moving handlebars, but also they had a wheelless version where the screen was fixed in front of you, but the body of it was very much like a super bike. Then they had one that was a bike with like fake wheels built into the mold, and the screen was on the front tilted upwards, like you were looking downward at the screen, almost like you're really riding a motorcycle. And those were, if you remember the like little quarter machine things you could ride as a small child, where you'd put a quarter in it and it'd be a little horse that moved or a car that would move around. It was like that, only a Sega game. They also did that kind of thing with Afterburner, where you could sit in an Afterburner game and it would move around. As you were moving the flight stick, the body of the machine would move around too, giving a real feel of control. And then they also had one that was a stand-up that you looked at with just the flight stick coming out of the front of it. And it had like a unique shape to the front of the cabinet. They were custom cabinets. And so, you know, you couldn't really like upgrade a Afterburner cabinet to be, you know, a different game. It was Afterburner, that's all it was. Like I was talking about earlier, the HS5 Dynamo can be used for basically any normal arcade game. And I'm considering buying a new multi-cart because they've come out with better ones. The one I have is from 09, and the emulation is acceptable, but compared to modern standards, it's just barely acceptable. Certain games play very, very well, and other games don't play well. So, like Golden Axe doesn't play well. System 16 games are not emulated well. Certain older Capcom games, like maybe Trojan or Ghouls and Ghosts or something, those are not emulated well. It seems to be primarily made to replicate Neo Geo speeds and frame rates and stuff. So the Neo Geo games usually run very, very well. But the newest cart, I'm pretty sure it has much, much more games. It has like 720 games. The horizontal version does, because there are vertical and horizontal versions. And it runs very, very well, like nearly identical. It's almost unmistakable from a real arcade machine. And so I'm considering getting those. There are several dozen of them for sale, like on eBay and stuff. And the way I have my HS5 wired right now, it's simply take out the cartridge, put in a new cartridge, and then the changes should be immediate. And so having a better cartridge with more games, but more importantly with better performance, would be ideal. So okay, let's check out another game real quick. Now to do this, I'm just restarting the system. I just turned off the 14 megahertz mod. Now I like to look through the new games because there are a lot of cool ones. So now the Altered Beast Upgraded. This is a mod that was done that adds the old sound effects and changes the overall color scheme to match better the arcade version of Altered Beast. So let's take a look at that one. I'm not going to raise the speed of it or anything. That's not necessary. I don't think this game suffers from any kind of slowdown or anything like that. Remember they had this at the skating rink when I was a kid, and I would play it there. Just love this game. So good. one thing you might not notice about this game is that unlike the arcade, it actually has a scrolling layer of graphics in the foreground, making it slightly more advanced than the arcade game. One thing that the arcade game has that this version doesn't have is the enemies fly apart in the arcade game. Like the limbs and body parts of the enemies go flying in all directions. In this, they kind of like become fiery little chevron-shaped kind of chunks that aren't nearly as big. A better representation of the enemies blowing apart is in the PC Engine version of the game. But that game doesn't really play as well as this game. This, I believe, is the definitive Altered Beast because it's easier, it has different difficulty levels, has a code for longer life bar, scrolling foreground layer, and you can play it as much as you want. You don't have to put quarters in it to play. Power up. Now this one's had the voices returned to the original, and I also have Golden Axe with that. Where the original arcade sounds, and honestly I never had a problem with the different sound. I prefer the Sega Genesis sound effects of Golden Axe. I didn't like the same scream happening over and over again in the arcade game, and so when they made a more like guttural kind of yell, it seemed to be less fake with the Genesis version of the game. And by that same idea, I believe that the Sega Genesis version of Golden Axe is the definitive version. It's better than the arcade, has an extra level, has better options for longer health bar, more lives, difficulty settings, sound and music preview kind of settings, and just better all around. It's an all-around better video game. One thing it doesn't have is as much color. That's it. Missing some color. So, rise from your grave. That's from the arcade. That was reintroduced. Notice how when he gets bigger, his head doesn't get bigger. So he just looks like he has a tiny head. Now we're going to fight Neff right now. Now in the original game, the arcade game, and I think in the PC Engine, he's actually doing a flying sidekick when he does this move. That was from the arcade. Now this electrification is I think based on the arcade. It looks better. His robe is a different color.
Welcome to your doom.
I like how he stands up right here. I just realized my autofocus isn't on. So, the Sega's working. Here's my power cable. It's plugged into the USB port of my laptop. And that's my multi-cart. This controller. Now if you know how stiff these controllers are, I'll just show you. See that? See how easily that moves? You can probably just automatically tell that that's better than what they usually are. Maybe I'll do a video on how to enhance these controllers. So, if you want to never have to worry about a AC adapter for your system again, then this is the mod. Thanks for watching.